Have you ever asked yourself, why do I always fall for the wrong person? Why is it that no matter how many promises we make to ourselves, no matter how cautious we try to be, we somehow end up in relationships that mirror our deepest wounds? Some people call it bad luck. Others blame timing, fate, or even destiny. But Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, would say something entirely different. He would say, it's not bad luck, it's your shadow choosing for you. Imagine for a moment that inside you, there's another presence, a hidden self you rarely acknowledge. It carries all the parts of you that you've denied, suppressed, or rejected. And when you fall in love, it is often this hidden self that makes the choice. Not your logical mind, not your conscious will, but the shadow. Music shifts, slightly darker, mysterious tones. And this is why, so often, love feels faded, magnetic, even dangerous. Because when the shadow is at play, you're not simply choosing a partner. You are choosing a mirror that reflects the unlived, unhealed, and unexplored parts of your own soul. In this video, we are going to explore Jung's hauntingly powerful idea of the shadow in love. We'll ask, why are we drawn to the wrong people? Why do relationships repeat the same painful patterns? And most importantly, how can we break free? This is not just psychology. This is a journey into the deepest mysteries of human love, a journey into your shadow. To understand why we fall for the wrong people, we must first understand what the shadow really is. Carl Jung described the shadow as everything within us that we have disowned. Our fears, our insecurities, our hidden desires, our unlived life. It is the part of us that we push away, but that never disappears. Instead, the shadow waits, and it has a clever way of showing itself through other people. Think back to a time when you felt an instant attraction to someone. Maybe you couldn't even explain why. Something about them felt magnetic, irresistible. That was likely your shadow speaking. Because the shadow doesn't just hold darkness. It also holds everything we crave but have denied ourselves. If you grew up never feeling safe, your shadow might pull you toward someone strong and protective. If you felt ignored, you might be drawn to someone charming and expressive. If you always suppress your anger, you might fall for someone who radiates power or dominance. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman. Let's call her Sarah. She grew up in a home where emotions were rarely expressed. Her father was cold, distant. Her mother, quiet and withdrawn. Sarah learned early, do not be too emotional. Do not expect warmth. Stay small. As an adult, Sarah found herself attracted to passionate, fiery men who were dramatic, expressive, even volatile. At first, it felt thrilling, like fire melting the ice inside her. But slowly the thrill became pain. Those men who seemed passionate were also controlling, sometimes manipulative, sometimes cruel. Sarah couldn't understand why she kept choosing the same type of partner. Until one day in therapy, she was told, it's not random. You are falling in love with your shadow. The fire you repressed as a child now burns inside others. But because it is unconscious, it comes to you in dangerous forms. This is the great paradox of the shadow in love. We fall for the wrong people not because we are foolish, but because on a deeper level, we are searching for wholeness. The shadow chooses partners who carry the parts of ourselves we have lost. But when we are unconscious of this dynamic, the attraction often becomes destructive. Instead of healing us, it wounds us further. This is why patterns repeat. Why someone leaves one toxic relationship, only to find themselves in another. Why the same story seems to play out again and again, with only the faces changing. It's not bad luck. It's not fate. It's the shadow, silently pulling the strings. But here's the secret. Once you see the shadow, once you bring it into the light, the spell begins to break. Because love does not have to be a repetition of old wounds. It can also be the doorway to healing. But that requires one thing, awareness. When we fall in love, especially with someone who feels like a force of nature, what we are really experiencing is the unconscious being stirred into action. Carl Jung described this as the moment when our shadow projects itself onto another human being. Think about it. You meet someone and instantly you are drawn to them, not because of their resume, not because of logical compatibility, but because something in them feels magnetic. Your heart races, your body tingles, your mind fills with images of possibility. It is as if you've met a missing piece of yourself. But here's the paradox. That piece you are recognizing is often the part of yourself that you have long denied, repressed, or disowned. The very qualities you might avoid within yourself, the darkness, the anger, the wildness, the mystery, suddenly appear in another person, clothed in beauty, charm, or danger. And so begins the seduction of the shadow. The shadow isn't just about darkness. It's about wholeness. When you encounter someone who embodies traits that you've disowned, your psyche lights up with fascination. If you are disciplined and rule-bound, you may fall for someone wild and free. If you are shy and introverted, you may be drawn to someone loud, bold, and unafraid. If you've been conditioned to be good all your life, the rebel becomes intoxicating. It feels like attraction, chemistry, fate. But psychologically, it's projection. You're not just falling for the person. You're falling for the missing parts of yourself. Here lies the danger. Projection blinds us. When the shadow is projected onto another person, we don't see them for who they truly are. Instead, we see our own unconscious reflection shining back at us. This explains why so many people say, "I thought they were perfect. They were nothing like who I imagined in the end." The reality is, we didn't really fall in love with the person. We fell in love with the image of our own shadow, the piece of ourselves that was waiting to be integrated. And so the relationship begins with fire and passion, but often ends with heartbreak and confusion. Popular culture tells us, follow the chemistry. If it feels electric, it must be love. But Jung would warn us, intense chemistry is not always a sign of soulmate love. It can also be a warning sign. It can mean that your shadow projection is at its strongest. That overwhelming rush, the sense that you've known them forever, the irresistible pull, it may not be destiny. It may be your unconscious screaming for attention, demanding that you confront the parts of yourself you've ignored. In other words, the person in front of you is less of a partner and more of a mirror reflecting the hidden parts of your soul. Now, you might wonder, why do I keep falling for the wrong person? Why do the same patterns repeat in my love life? The answer lies in the shadow. If you do not integrate your shadow consciously, you will keep projecting it unconsciously. The woman who always attracts unavailable men is often projecting her own disowned fear of intimacy. The man who constantly falls for manipulative partners may be projecting his own repressed hunger for power. The person who keeps ending up in chaotic relationships might secretly crave the chaos they avoid in themselves. Until the shadow is acknowledged, it will continue to seduce us, over and over again, dragging us into relationships that feel fated but end in pain. But here's the hopeful side. The shadow is not just a curse. It is also an invitation. Every time you fall for the wrong person, your unconscious is calling you to grow. It is saying, look here, there is a part of you waiting to be claimed. The shadow is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to complete you. The problem is, most people mistake this psychological lesson for romantic destiny. They try to merge with the other person instead of reclaiming the lost part of themselves. The task is not to own the other person. It is to own yourself. If the shadow explains why we fall for certain people, the next step is understanding what happens when the relationship itself becomes a mirror of the shadow. This is where things get complicated. At first, love feels intoxicating. You are pulled towards someone with a gravitational force that seems fated. But as the months pass, the very qualities that once fascinated you start to irritate, frighten, or hurt you. The partner who once embodied freedom now feels unreliable. The partner who once seemed strong now feels controlling. Why does this happen? Jung would say, because the shadow projection cannot last forever. Sooner or later, reality creeps in. You realize you are not loving the actual person in front of you, but the shadow archetype you projected onto them. And when that projection begins to dissolve, conflict arises. Have you ever noticed how couples often fight about the same things, over and over again? This is not random. These recurring conflicts are the psyche's way of forcing both partners to face their shadow. For example, a woman who denies her anger might fall for a man who expresses it openly. At first, she admires his strength. Later, she despises his aggression. A man who represses his need for care might fall for a nurturing partner. At first, he feels healed. Later, he resents feeling dependent. What began as attraction morphs into repulsion. But beneath the fights, something deeper is at play. The unconscious is asking both people to integrate what they rejected in themselves. This is why so many relationships feel like wars. The partner becomes both the most beloved person and the greatest enemy. The one who lifts you up is also the one who brings you down. But Jung's perspective shifts the blame. Instead of saying they are toxic or I always choose the wrong people, he would encourage you to ask, what part of me have I projected onto this person? What am I running from in myself that I keep meeting in them? This is not about excusing abuse or staying in harmful dynamics. It's about recognizing that the shadow doesn't just choose our lovers. It shapes the entire relationship dynamic. Here's the good news. When couples recognize the shadow at work, the relationship can evolve into something extraordinary. Instead of demanding that the partner change, each person can use the conflict as a mirror. The arguments stop being just about who's right or wrong and start becoming about, what is this showing me about myself? When two people commit to this inner work, love transforms. It becomes less about projection and more about connection, less about shadow battles and more about shared growth. This is a turning point Jung envisioned, when romantic love evolves from an unconscious projection into a conscious partnership. We don't just fall for the wrong people. We often stay trapped in relationships that mirror our shadow. But if we're willing to face the hidden parts of ourselves, those very struggles can become the doorway to deeper intimacy. Up to this point, we've explored how the shadow influences attraction, why we keep repeating unhealthy patterns, and how projection blinds us to the truth of who our partners really are. But the real question remains, how do we break free? How do we move from unconscious attraction to conscious love? This is where the work of shadow integration comes into play. The first step is awareness. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Think about your past relationships. Do you notice the same theme repeating? Do your partners often carry a similar flaw, whether it's emotional unavailability, controlling behavior, or lack of commitment? Do you find yourself drawn to people who mirror a very specific wound from your childhood? When you begin to recognize the pattern, you stop being its prisoner. The moment you shine light on the shadow, you weaken its hold over your choices. The partners we are most intensely drawn to often hold a piece of ourselves we've disowned. For example, if you always attract dominating partners, perhaps you repress your own assertiveness. If you keep falling for emotionally unavailable people, maybe you suppress your own fear of intimacy. If you are drawn to partners who are impulsive and wild, it may be because you rejected your own inner spontaneity. By reclaiming these qualities within yourself, you no longer need to find them in another person. Shadow work requires courage. Some practical methods include journaling. Write about your triggers in relationships. What makes you most angry, jealous, or insecure? These are doorways to your shadow. Dialogues with the shadow. Speak with the parts of yourself you've buried. Allow them to express themselves without judgment. Therapy or depth psychology. Work with someone trained in Jungian or psychodynamic methods to uncover blind spots. When you begin to reclaim your shadow, your attraction shifts. You stop being magnetically pulled toward what wounds you, and instead become open to what heals you. Jung believed in the lifelong process of individuation, becoming your truest, most integrated self. In love, individuation doesn't mean becoming independent of others. Instead, it means bringing your whole, authentic self into the relationship. This transforms love from unconscious fusion into a conscious union. Instead of two half-selves clinging to each other, you have two whole beings choosing each other. When the shadow rules love, relationships often feel like fate, like something we can't escape. But when we integrate the shadow, love becomes a choice. You no longer fall for the wrong people simply because of unconscious wounds. You begin to choose partners who align with your conscious values, your growth, and your vision for life. And here lies the paradox. The moment you stop seeking someone to complete you, you open the door to real intimacy. Love isn't about finding your missing piece. It's about becoming whole within yourself, so you can meet another whole soul. Only then does love stop being a battlefield of shadows and become a dance of light, breaking the spell of the shadow. Up until now, we've seen how the shadow seduces us into relationships, how it keeps us locked in cycles of attraction and pain, and how it makes us believe that this time, maybe love will save us. But if we stop here, the shadow wins. So now comes the most important question. How do we break the spell? First, let's get one thing straight. You don't destroy the shadow. You don't kill it. You don't silence it forever. The shadow is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a part of you to be integrated. Jung taught that wholeness doesn't come from rejecting the shadow, but from embracing it, from shining a light on the darkness, not so you can run away, but so you can understand it. Think about it like this. If you keep falling for people who are emotionally unavailable, controlling, or destructive, it's not because you're cursed. It's because your shadow is trying to teach you something. Maybe it wants you to face your own fear of intimacy. Maybe it wants you to stop abandoning yourself. Maybe it wants you to grow into the very qualities you're seeking in another. The first step is self-awareness. Start noticing your patterns. Who are you drawn to? What kind of relationships keep repeating in your life? If you look closely, you'll see a theme. And that theme is the shadow speaking. The second step is ownership. Instead of saying, they hurt me, they betrayed me, they abandoned me, ask, why did I allow it? What part of me was drawn to it? What need was I trying to fill? This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your power. Because once you own your shadow, it stops controlling you. And the third step is integration. This is where the real transformation happens. Instead of projecting your unacknowledged qualities onto others, you start to develop them within yourself. If you're always attracted to confidence, maybe it's because your shadow hides your own confidence. If you keep falling for caretakers, maybe it's because your shadow hides your ability to nurture yourself. When you integrate these qualities, something magical happens. Your relationships shift. Suddenly, you're no longer magnetized by the toxic pull of the shadow. You start to see clearly. You stop falling for the wrong people because you stopped abandoning the parts of yourself that once needed rescuing. But let's be honest, this process is not easy. Facing your shadow is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. It's painful. It's messy. It's humbling because it forces you to admit truths about yourself that you'd rather ignore. And yet, if you're brave enough, it's also liberating. Because when you face your shadow in love, you don't just heal your relationships. You heal yourself. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing someone complete you is the moment you're finally ready for love. Not the fantasy, not the projection, not the shadow dance, but the real thing. So, the question now becomes, if our shadow is the secret architect of our attractions, does that mean we are doomed to always fall for the wrong people? Not at all. In fact, awareness of shadow is the very doorway to transformation. Carl Jung believed that what we do not make conscious will rule our life, and we will call it fate. Think about that. If we ignore the shadow, we end up repeating the same painful love story over and over again. But when we bring the shadow to light, suddenly we gain the power to change the script. How does this healing happen? It begins with brutal honesty. We must ask ourselves, what qualities in others trigger me the most? What do I secretly judge, yet also secretly desire? Why do I always seem to be drawn to the same type of partner, even when it ends badly? When you write these answers down, you are not just journaling. You are speaking with your unconscious, and the unconscious listens. The second step is projection withdrawal. Instead of saying they hurt me, ask, what part of myself do I see in them? This doesn't excuse toxic behavior. It empowers you, because the more you reclaim your projections, the less power the shadow has over you. The third step is integration. This means accepting the shadow, not rejecting it. For example, if your shadow carries jealousy, you don't need to become jealous. You need to admit that jealousy lives inside you. Only then can you work with it consciously. And here's the beautiful truth. When you integrate your shadow, your taste in love changes. You stop being magnetized only by wounds and instead begin to notice partners who reflect your wholeness. Your heart becomes less hungry for intensity and more open to authenticity. This is a turning point in Jung's view of love. Healing the shadow doesn't just make you choose better partners. It makes you capable of deeper, truer love. So here we are. We began this journey by asking, why we fall for the wrong people? And the answer led us deep into Jung's world of the shadow, the hidden self that shapes our choices in love. We learned that sometimes it isn't love at first sight. It's shadow recognizing shadow. Two wounded parts colliding, mistaking intensity for intimacy. And while this can lead to heartbreak, it can also awaken us if we dare to look inward. Because love is not just about finding the one. It's about finding yourself. Every failed relationship, every heartbreak, every betrayal. It is not just punishment. It is a mirror showing you the parts of yourself you have not yet claimed. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But when you make the shadow conscious, when you face it, accept it, integrate it, you break the cycle. You stop falling for the wrong people. And instead, you rise into love that feels different, steadier, softer, more real. Because here's the secret. True love is not the absence of darkness. It is the courage to face your darkness together. Not someone completing your missing pieces, but someone standing beside you while you embrace your wholeness. So the next time you feel that irresistible pull toward someone, pause. Ask yourself, is this my heart or is this my shadow? That single question might save you years of pain. And maybe, just maybe, it will lead you to the kind of love that doesn't just excite your wounds, but heals them. If this journey into Jung's shadow and love spoke to you, imagine what could happen if more people understood it. Share this with someone who keeps asking, why do I always fall for the wrong person? Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because we have so much more to explore about the human mind, the heart, and the mysteries of love. And remember, healing begins the moment you shine light into the shadow.